funny thing that can happen. Like I've had questions about, well, if you're asking, it's all you, so why ask? Or these senses of self-worthlessness, of like, no, I can't ask, or I should be able to do it myself. I'm not going to ask. The spiritual path is done alone. I must blah, blah, or an arrogance of like, come on, show up, give me the yada, yada. It's like, whatever, right? And so in terms of how do I ask, there's this respect for creation. And when I was talking about the perfection of forgetting, there's a respect for forgetting, and a respect for when I get to see all the way through the dimensional layers and see the creating happening and the choosing happening on a larger scale. And then a respect for being in the smaller self that doesn't get to have that perspective because it's the wisest thing. And so even though it is all a game of oneself at play, the individuated aspects are gifted an individual lens. And in that multiplicity, then the appropriate relationship is love and respect. And so even though I might be, can open to a place where my guides are within me as smaller components, there still is a respect for the service that's being offered. And when I'm in the personality self asking a guide to share their perspective that I can't see, there's respect for that position. And they have respect for me as the human being without the vision, and they have respect for me as the larger self that then they're functioning within as just like a finger of a hand moving. And so the request is of love and respect and appreciation, and also with the not knowing, not putting a design on how that help happens. So you might ask, feeling the need for support in a particular way, and it just shows up in the most miraculous, bizarre, unconventional way. Or fun things, fun, silly things that people might call coincidence. When you're working on something, you're asking for help, and all of a sudden a song shows up on the radio that has the exact line in it, and it gets highlighted in your consciousness as, oh, haha, thank you. So anyway, that's how I ask. But the asking is really important. And there are so many times I forget to ask. I'm just in the human life, making decisions about things, and a dear friend or family member will say, because I'll ask a question, what do you think about this thing? And someone will reflect back, well, why don't you just ask? Because like they're seeing how I can ask. I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that. So like we get to have this play throughout all these layers, and the asking is really important because free will is honored and respected. So the asking is part of the whole thing. And sometimes I'll ask and I'll be told I need to not know, that I actually need to go through the experience with the amount of information I have, or I need to explore other ways of opening to information because that's part of the learning. And so the information isn't given. But that's the answer, and so an answer still comes. So there still is the guidance. There still is that support. There was a discussion that was happening between different teachers from the SAND conference. There were just conversations happening and some emails, and it was a question someone was asking about. Well, what about devotion? If you're everything, what's devotion? If you're God, then why have devotion? Or what's the difference between prayer and meditation and all of that? And for me, it's this game of these layers of I am, these lenses of self, that the human self is God, but there's a humility and a respect that goes in both directions. So when I'm resting in a God consciousness or God self-consciousness, when I'm resting as that, there's just profound compassion and humility for what the human experience is. You know, it's like God bowing to the human for what the human then, the flesh that we live out that suffers. And then the human bowing in humility to creation for the brilliance and the magnificence and the absolute astounding miracle of existence and the perfection of it all. So for me in prayer, there's the humility and grace and love and request and honoring that goes in both directions. And so speaking of it as abiding, you know, or like a deep, heartfelt, meditative prayer, right, is the same thing for me.